theory, performance, rhythm, harmony, line and form, acoustics, notation, orchestration, timbre, neurology, and perception. These are the keys to understanding music. Hello, and welcome to Understanding Music, and part 2 of our look at the concept of a key. A key is a group of 7 notes that fit together, and if you put it in the proper order, you can write the melody of a major scale. In the last video, we looked at how the Renaissance theorists looked at the major scale as 2 major tetrachords on top of each other. And then they supposed, what if we took the upper tetrachord, made that the lower tetrachord of another key, could we come up with yet another key? And they did, by starting at C major and going up a fifth to G major, and by only changing one note, the 7th note of the scale, and raising it by a semitone, they had a new combination of 7 notes and a new key that they called G major. And then they continued doing this. They went up to the 5th of G and figured out that by raising the 7th note again, they could have the key of D major. And so last video we looked at all the keys that used sharps, and today we're going to look at the opposite. We're going to look at the keys that use flats. Okay, so let's start with C major. C major is the group of notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, all natural notes. And we're going to go down a fifth. So going down a fifth from C, C, B, A, G, F, we get to the note F. Now, if we go down 7 semitones from C, we start on C and we go down 7, that brings us to the note F natural. So F is a perfect fifth down from C, and that makes sense because it ends up being the 4th note of the scale of C major. So if we wanted to start the scale of F major, and we compare that to C major, well, now we have the beginnings of a whole tone scale, and that's not a proper major tetrachord. F to B is what some people call a tritone. More accurately, in this case, it's an augmented 4th. You want a perfect 4th. Nice smooth sound like that. And so that's the notes F, G, A, and B flat. So if we go down from C major, as we go down in fifths, we have to lower one note with a flat. So if we compare F to the piano keyboard, C, B, A, G, F, and we want to write a scale starting on there, we go up a tone or 2 semitones, up a whole tone or 2 semitones, and then up a semitone. Now what are we going to call these notes? Remember, we have to have them sequentially. So the first note, if it's F, then the second note has to be called G. So F natural, G natural, then A natural. This has to be a B note. It could be called an A sharp or a B flat, but in this context, it has to be called a B flat. The same way that when we were just looking at F sharp major. If we call this an F sharp and we go up tone, tone, semitone, then this is an F sharp, a G sharp, an A sharp, a B, and then up tone, 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 C sharp, D sharp. This has to be called an E sharp. Normally it's called an F, but it has to go in order. F sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. And all the keys work that way. No matter what you decide to call the tonic, then you're going to, well, that's a bad choice. Why? Because this could be A flat, in which case it would be, I should have known that. A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat. But I wouldn't want to call, in this particular instance, I wouldn't want to call this G sharp, because there is no real key signature called G sharp. There is an imaginary key signature called G sharp, and the notes would be G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F. What are we going to call this? Well, it can only be called F double sharp, G sharp. So now you have a scale that has 7 notes, but you really have 8 accidentals, 6 sharps and 1 double sharp. So that's why that's considered an imaginary key, not a real key, and you won't find it on the circle of fifths. Having said that, there are lots of imaginary keys that starts on notes that are not on the circle of the fifths. So to go back to C major, if we compare C major to G major is all natural notes except for F sharp. So if we go down a fifth from G, and we start on C, C, D, E, F, instead of F sharp, we're going to lower that to the F, natural. So in the same way, if we take the notes of C major and we go down a fifth, then that fourth note of F, which is F, G, A, B, we're going to take the B natural and put it down a semitone to B flat. If we go down a fifth from F, a perfect fifth, or we go to the fourth note of F, or let's go down, it's easier, we get to the note B flat, the one we just flattened. And if we say, what's the scale of B flat major, we find that, again, the fourth note of this new scale has to be lowered. So now we're going to use an E flat. If we go down a fifth from B flat, we get to that note E flat. And so the scale of E flat is going to have to lower its fourth note, which is A, to A flat. And if we go down a fifth from E flat, that brings us to that note A flat. And so we'll have to lower its fourth note, which is D flat. And if we go down a perfect fifth from A flat, this brings us to the note D flat. And in the key of D flat, we now have to lower its fourth note, G, to G flat. And if we go to the fifth note down of D flat, that brings us to G flat. And G flat is the key at the bottom of the circle of fifths, which we will look at in a moment, that has 6 flats. So all the notes in G flat major are flat notes except for one. G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, and the note F natural. Go down a fifth from G flat, we get to C flat. C flat major has the same relationship to C major as C sharp does. C sharp major is all sharp notes. C major is all natural notes, and C flat major is all flat notes. Now, if we look at the note C flat, it's the same key as B major. B major only has 5 sharps. So in most instances, it's easier to think of that sound and the key that revolves around that sound as B, because then you only have to deal with 5 sharps, just the black notes and white notes. If we call that C flat, then we have to have what I call 2 weird notes, flat notes that are actually white keys. And this whole white and black note thing only happens on the piano keyboard. A flute doesn't have that, and a chordophone doesn't have that. They just have frets or holes that you cover. Because the shape of the piano keyboard helps us so much in understanding how these relationship works, we tend to focus on it. And that basically only shows the relationship of C major. If we took another key, like G major or F major, and did the same thing where we color the keys for that, we end up with these other shapes. If we look at all the keys as a group, we can organize them in various ways. We can put them in chromatic order from lowest to highest. We can organize them as to keys that share similar notes, like D flat and D, and C sharp, C, and C flat. And we can also put them in an order from the key that has the most amount of flats, which is C flat, up through to the key that has no flats, which is C, natural, major, and up through to the key that has the most amount of sharps, which is C sharp. And this gives us a couple of things. One, it gives us a very big chord, which is what we call stacked fifths. A low note and then a perfect fifth above that, and a perfect fifth above that, and a perfect fifth above that, and so on. It makes this huge chord. And 2, it gives us a very important progression, the progression of keys from the key that has the most amount of flats, which some people call the flattest key, and that's not really a proper name, but a lot of people use it, to what we would call the sharpest key, or the key that has the most amount of sharps. And we can write this out in a line. Now, the minute you say line is a shape, and you can do all sorts of neat things with a line. So what we're going to do in this instance, and before I do that, I want to point out that at the end of these two, of this progression, either end, there are three pairs of enharmonic equivalents. The key of C flat is the enharmonic equivalent of B major. They both would start on that same key. Key in the sense of a piano key, as opposed to the key being the group of 7 notes. Unfortunately, it also means the thing you press down on woodwinds, and it has a number of definitions. And so the three pairs are C sharp and D flat, B major and C flat, and F sharp and G flat. And so if we take this line and we bend it into a circle, we're going to take those keys that are enharmonic equivalents of each other and match them up, and then now what we have is a circle with 12 positions that represent the 12 different sounds we hear as keys. C major, D flat or C sharp major, D major, E flat major, or the imaginary key of D sharp, up through all the 12 different keys. Now, to draw a circle of fifths, it's a circle with 12 divisions, so it's similar to a clock, but instead of numbers going around, we replace the numbers with letters. And the way it works is like this. At the very top, what would normally be the 12th position, we put the note C. C is the key that does not have sharps and does not have flats. And then what we're going to do on the circle, we're going to go around the circle in a clockwise fashion, and where the 1 would be, we put the key that would have 1 sharp, which is G major. Where the 2 would be, we put the key that would have 2 sharps, which is D major. And at the 3 position, we put the key that would have 3 sharps, which is A major. And then the key with 4 sharps, E major, the key with 5 sharps, B major, the key with 6 sharps, F sharp major, and then finally the key with 7 sharps, C sharp major. If we go the other way around, we go counterclockwise, we're going to go down in fifths. So if we start at C major, which is the key that has no flats, and then at what would be the 11 o'clock position, or if you're thinking of a backwards clock, the backwards 1, we put the key with 1 flat, which is F major. And then at the backwards 2, or the 10 o'clock position, we have the key that would need 2 flats, which is B flat. And then 3rd position down would be E flat, 4th position down is A flat, and then D flat, which matches up where C sharp major was. And then a 5th down from there is G flat, and then finally C flat, the key with the most amount of flats. And so this shape organizes the keys as to how they work. Now, when we looked at the keys and which notes we were raising, to the note we had to raise to make G major was the F sharp. And then the key we had to raise to turn that into D major was C sharp, which is a perfect 5th up. And the note we had to raise to make A was the G sharp, a perfect 5th up from that. And so on and so on and so on. So the order that the sharps appear in terms of these keys also adheres to the circle of fifths. So sometimes we take these letters and we put them in the middle of the circle of fifths. First there's the F, and then there's the C, and then there's the G, and then there's the D, and then the A, and then the E, and then finally the B. The B is the last note to get a sharp, and it only gets that in C sharp major. The F is the first note to get a sharp, and it is a sharp note in all the keys that need sharps. Now, handily, if we remember, the first note we had to flatten in F major was B flat, which is at the end of this. So if we look at this progression and we go backwards, B flat is the first note that gets a flat, and the second flat we brought in the key of B flat was E flat, and then a perfect 5th down from that is A flat, and a perfect 5th down from that is D flat, and then G flat, and then C flat, and then finally F. So this same progression works both ways. There is a mnemonic device to remember that progression. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. And the opposite for the flats is battle ends and down goes Charles' father. And in the next video, when we talk about key signatures, I'll explain the meanings behind those phrases in more depth. But we can use that phrase. You just memorize it, write it out. One of the things I had to do was write it on a page over and over and over. I think it was 20 times or 30 times a day, every day for a couple of weeks. And by the end of the couple of weeks, you've memorized it. You might not even know what that progression means, but Father Charles goes down and ends battle. And still to this day, I frequently use those when I'm writing out my key signatures because it's just seared into my brain. It's a handy little phrase. So, for every one of the notes on the piano keyboard, there is a corresponding key to go with it. And if we start on the tonic of that key and play through the notes of that key, we will play the various major scales. Now, when we take a look at a piece of music, at the beginning of the first line of music, we have on the staff, we have the clef that tells us the range. And then right after that, we have what is known as a key signature, which is a shape that tells us what notes are to be sharpened or what notes are to be flattened to play this piece, and therefore it tells us what the key of the piece is. And that's what we're going to look at in the next video. See you then. Stay safe.